and welcome to Lunch and Learn with Melissa Bond. Today we have a very special guest, Craig Morley. He is going to discuss highest and best use. He's going to talk about doing a highest and best use analysis. He's going to talk about issues that we just need to be aware of and in order to remain USPAP compliant when we are doing our appraisal reports. So, Craig, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here. Craig is currently the president of the National Association of Appraisers. Craig is also a certified general appraiser in Arizona, Utah, and Nevada. So, Craig, welcome.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you, Melissa. Appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you today.
Well, thank you. I know your time is valuable, and so we're just going to get right to the heart of what we're going to discuss today. Highest and best use. Let me ask you this question. I'm a certified residential appraiser, and let's say I'm doing my 1004 form. I'm doing it for mortgage lending, for even general purposes. If I check the highest and best use box on my appraisal form as is this current use highest and best use, and I check yes, and if I just list the 4 tests, have I met my USPAP requirement for highest and best use?
You know, I think most of your state investigators would say no, you haven't, because in USPAP, it doesn't say you need to state the highest and best use. You need to summarize it, which requires analysis of each of those 4 tests. And so it may be a legal use. It may be the, a physically possible and economically and financially feasible. But if I don't explain to my client the analysis portion of that, then I might find myself in trouble if I just check the box and use some kind of a canned statement without some little bit more analysis than oftentimes what we see on a lot of our residential appraisal reports.
Right, so I actually need to go into detail and summarize each of these tests. So, okay, if I were doing that, physically possible, let's take the first one. That seems to be the easiest. Is that correct?
Oftentimes it is, although sometimes if you've got an existing home, not a problem. I'm doing a vacant lot or I'm doing a proposed home, that becomes a more significant element of the highest and best use.
Correct. And then legally permissible, when we're discussing that, we have a little research to do, correct?
We do, and I think where we oftentimes run into problem with the legal permissibility component of highest and best use is when have something that has been in place for a while and zoning has changed over time, and I might be a legal non-conforming use. I might be an illegal use. Somebody's added on to or altered what was originally permitted, and it may put the nature of the improvements outside of the original permit that was given when the property was built, and so it can be a real issue if we're not careful.
Okay, so that kind of brings us to another point. Can I appraise a home in a commercial zone, and what can I do if I'm certified residential?
We see that as oftentimes comes up, and you'll see some municipalities that will take a broad swath of commercial, and there will be a lot of residential homes in the area. If the property, if the highest and best use is residential, then clearly a residential appraiser can do it. The question is how do I do a competent highest and best use on a commercially zoned property if I'm not a certified general appraiser and if I'm not routinely dealing with those kinds of properties? How do I know if the value of the land in a commercial alternative use is higher than the current use? And I can probably figure that out, but the analysis becomes a little bit more involved. And what I see happen and what I encourage people to do, I've got a dozen appraisers that are certified residential appraisers in our area that when they get a commercial appraisal assignment, they give me a call. And they'll say, hey, I've got this property. This is the circumstance. What do you think? You're a certified general appraiser. You've done work in this area. Is this a residential or a commercial use? And most of the time it's residential. And then what the appraiser does is they say, I had significant professional assistance in the highest and best use. They report it in the certification. And that may be the abundance of caution, but it's certainly probably the best way to deal with it if you're not sure. And so there's ways to do it, but I think you've got to be cautious because sometimes if it's a close call, it may be an assignment that you may not want to accept.
Well, and you know, you opened a door to something that I think is very important to us. We need to realize when we have, we've gotten to maybe the outer limits of our capabilities. And I'm a proponent of doing precisely what you said. Contact someone that does this, and you used a key phrase as a normal course of business. That's important. When it's something that doesn't mean that we cannot challenge ourselves and stretch our capabilities, but we do want to consult with someone that this is their normal area of practice and this is their area of expertise. So I think you're right about that. Partner, right?
And I think one of the problems, Melissa, and I think you see this, is as appraisers, we oftentimes kind of sequester ourselves in a extra bedroom or garage or basement, and we don't talk to each other. And having those relationships where we have people that if we don't interact with our associates and make some friendships and relationships, it's hard to do that in this virtual world that we're living in, particularly now. But you know, I see a lot of times where we don't take advantage of some of the social interactions through some of the trade associations with conferences and things, which is a beautiful place to make those connections with each other and find someone that maybe is interested in affiliating and helping you out from time to time.
Well, yes, and I agree with you. I will say that several years back, I opened myself to national conferences and have just enjoyed the networking, have just enjoyed the contacts that I've been able to make that have been invaluable in some areas. We have resources, you know. I will go ahead and say the National Association of Appraisers is an excellent choice. We also have so many other organizations. There are so many coalitions now across our country. I would hope that each of us take that initiative to be a part of the coalitions, because truly they do, the coalitions do so much legislative work and represent. So that being said, let me ask you another question. Now, we're talking about highest and best use, but let's go one little topic deeper on this. Is there a difference between excess land and surplus land? And I can say sometimes we get these confused, and knowing the real difference between the two and how they each apply, vital. So can you just expound on that for just a moment?
That is a huge component of that highest and best use that we're talking about, and it can have such a significant impact on the way that we deal with this. And I fear sometimes that because we're not entirely sure, we can get ourselves into trouble. So the way that I remember the difference between excess land and surplus land is surplus land you can't subdivide. If it's surplus, and so the S with the subdivision means I can't subdivide it, whereas excess land means it has a separate highest and best use and has the possibility of being separated from the primary improvement so that it might be able to be used in some other way. And usually the primary difference is the excess land has a separate highest and best use, whereas the surplus land does not. So the way that we value that excess land is different. That the surplus land may not contribute value at the same rate as excess land would, and we have to be very careful to make sure that we are clear on the difference between the two and how to value those various components appropriately.
Okay, let me ask you a question, which is just happening, real time happening. Worked on this morning before you and I had this opportunity. I have two independent lots in a particular subdivision. Two independent lots. The particular owner chose to construct the home improvements, and straddle the two lots. Now, Craig, do I have excess land or surplus land?
Well, the problem that you've got is when the homeowner does that, and a lot of times you'll find people get frustrated because, well, I got two lots. And you go, yeah, but you have changed, your highest and best use. Now, what is physically possible? Because I have put the improvements and straddled both lots, I no longer have two lots that could be separated and sold off independently. So fundamentally, you end up with a situation where I've got surplus land, but the valuation component is kind of different. If I had stuck the house on one side, I might have an extra lot that I could sell off, in which case the value would be different than just one big residential lot.
Right. So that means I have a little bit of summarizing to do, correct?
I need to tell my client, because I got two legal descriptions and two lots on the plat map, and somebody's going to look at that and say, well, gee, you got two lots here. And I need to explain to them, well, yeah, that may be true, but this is the circumstance, and that's part of this physically possible part of that highest and best use analysis.
Right. So communication is the key. And let's go one step further and say communication is required. We do need to communicate this to our client. Many times I have found that the client simply is not aware, only because the borrower is not aware of the processes that we go through. So this is not something that the borrower would just automatically make the lender aware of. That's our responsibility. So thank you for that. Let me ask you one more question. Can a residential appraiser just appraise land? That is within a residential appraiser's capability, is it not?
It is, and I think sometimes the thing that we need to be careful of is, and not all states regulate the licenses the same way, but generally speaking, if I have land that is a commercial zone and I'm in an area where commercial development is taking place, and it seems likely that that's the highest and best use of the property, I would encourage appraisers not to accept an assignment like that, because the question you have to ask yourself, how can I perform a competent highest and best use in terms of legally permissible, physically possible, economically feasible? And the financially feasible component is the problem, because I don't do commercial property. How do I know what's financially feasible on the property, or what's the productive use? And so I think in those circumstances, you're probably better off not doing an assignment like that. If I have a large piece of land that has the possibility of being subdivided, as a residential appraiser, I can appraise 4 residential dwelling units, a fourplex, but I can't do 5. And with FIREA, basically the setup there is that if I have more than 5 units, it requires some kind of bulk value analysis, which oftentimes requires some kind of discounted cash flow analysis, In which case, if I've got a residentially zoned parcel of land that could support more than 5 units, should I accept the assignment? Well, my advice is probably not, or at least affiliate with somebody if you want to do that, because I think you start to get yourself in a position, if somebody's unhappy with the assignment results and they turn it in, you might find yourself having a problem with your licensing agency.
And we might find that we should have taken that advice of just know when to decline the assignment. And, you know, folks, even if sometimes we have a little skin in that game, you know, we've put some time into working on this assignment, and we get to that point where we have to decide, oh, this is a little deeper than what my area of expertise is. Go ahead and decline. That's a good business decision to turn that assignment down, communicate that with your client why you're turning that assignment down, and then you stay on the better side of the licensing board. And that's really where we always want to be.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the challenges we run into is that when we get into a commercial environment, you know, there's not a residential appraiser alive who hasn't had a real estate agent say, I don't agree with your value, and they give you a bunch of sales that are not comparable but have a higher price per square foot. And they say, look, you know, we have all these things selling at a higher price per square foot. Well, in a commercial environment, oftentimes these properties are analyzed on a price per square foot. If I'm doing a commercial land, it's common to use a price per square foot, whereas on a residential lot, I probably rarely do that. And we see commercial appraisers getting themselves into trouble trying to do residential properties because they're trying to appraise this stuff on a price per square foot because that's what they do in their commercial practice. And knowing the appropriate method is critical if we want to provide credible assignment results on our work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Knowing where our area of expertise lies and knowing where our limits lie. Well, Craig, I just want to thank you. I have so enjoyed you being here with us today. As usual, your wealth of knowledge is just amazing. Folks, I hope that you've been able to take this few little minutes to just pump up your knowledge base and continue practicing as the professional that your license says that you are. So, Craig, any closing words?
Melissa, thanks for all you do. You do such a fabulous job of putting some of these things out and letting people know. We're grateful for your efforts there, and I hope anybody who has a chance to go get some continuing education, go let Melissa show you how to do things. She's awesome, and I've got a little YouTube channel. We do a few little things every now and again. If you want to get a few tips and tricks on some of these things, feel free to do that. And I hope that maybe next spring we will see all of the good folks in Gulf Coast at the ACTS conference that we're planning for next spring. We had to postpone it because of this craziness that's going on now. So we'd love to meet a lot of you personally there.
Yes, Craig, you are right. And I am so excited that the ACTS conference selected Mississippi. And folks, that's in my backyard. And I was thrilled. Of course, as Craig said, the conference had to be postponed due to the pandemic. So next April 2021, I hope to see each of you there. You will have a plethora of fabulous folks to spend your day with. Gives you an opportunity to branch out, just branch out. So thank you to each and every one of you. If you need anything, I'm always available for you. Feel free to call, feel free to email. If we can bounce ideas off each other and hone our skills, that's what it's all about. So this has been your Lunch and Learn with Melissa Bond and my special guest, Craig Morley.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, and